Hi everyone, and welcome to our workshop on migrating content using groups in ArcGIS Enterprise. I'm Kenyon Huber-Wilker, a solution engineer on Esri's national government team, and I'm joined today for this presentation by my colleague, Bill Major. We also have Hillary Curtis, a product manager for ArcGIS Enterprise, and Caroline Wright, a product engineer for ArcGIS Enterprise, as our moderators who will help facilitate question and answer at the end of this presentation. So let's go ahead and start by diving into why we would want to move content across the ArcGIS system in the first place. Now, there's a wide range of reasons concerning why we would want to move content between two or more ArcGIS organizations, including creating a local or secondary backup of data, moving feature services from ArcGIS Online to ArcGIS Enterprise, moving an application and its dependencies from one ArcGIS Enterprise to another, or needing to collaborate on data and apps with another ArcGIS Enterprise. Now, these are just a few workflows that involve moving content between organizations within the ArcGIS system, and there's a host of other potential reasons why one would choose to do this. So now that we've identified a couple of reasons why we'd want to move content, let's go ahead and break down the various ways we actually use to move content across the ArcGIS system. And really, we're going to discuss this specifically as it pertains to moving it between two different organizations, primarily focusing on ArcGIS Enterprise to ArcGIS Enterprise, with a few exceptions. And when thinking about when and how to use these tools, it's really important to understand which role and workflow they fit across our system. Within the ArcGIS Enterprise portal, as well as in ArcGIS Online, you have the capability to export a hosted feature layer that you own as a local file in a variety of formats, including CSV, Excel, shapefile, file geodatabase, and others. Using ArcGIS Pro, you can move feature services between orgs using the Copy Features tool in the Data Management Toolbox, or script it using ArcPy. And this enables you to create a local feature class that can then be shared into another organization or worked with locally. By leveraging the ArcGIS API for Python, you can use the clone items method to move items between two ArcGIS organizations. However, when using this tool, keep in mind that due to the variety of ArcGIS enterprises, the differences between ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise, and different content creation methodologies, there may be some circumstances that lead the clone to come close but not quite produce an identical copy in the new org. With ArcGIS Notebooks, you can also move content using either the Python API in ArcGIS Notebook Standards or the Python API in ArcPy in Notebooks Advanced. Additionally, since Notebooks works across the ArcGIS platform, they enable you to easily script the movement of content between two organizations using either ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Online, or ArcGIS Enterprise. ArcGIS Assistant is a Swiss Army knife type tool that is good at moving and viewing most content in some apps between organizations. But it currently doesn't work with all applications and their dependencies, all types of enterprise configurations, or disconnected enterprises, and furthermore isn't a fully supported Esri tool. Now, distributed collaboration is a really great tool when you want to access content across organizations, and it really benefits users who want to easily sync content, update content between organizations, as well as support more dynamic content collaboration between two connected ArcGIS organizations. And it's an option to collaborate on content between organizations, but not necessarily recommended to use if you're trying to fully migrate content between organizations. And like we said at the beginning, each of these tools supports a specific type of content migration or collaboration workflow across the ArcGIS system. And it's important to understand that they all have things they're best suited for and what that thing is. At ArcGIS Enterprise version 10.8.1, we introduced a new tool that many of you have asked for to support moving applications and their dependencies between ArcGIS Enterprise organizations without requiring connectivity between them using groups. So let's dive a little deeper and talk about why you would want to use groups for content migration. Now, most organizations have an ArcGIS Enterprise deployment where users create, collaborate, and discover geospatial content. Recently, we've seen larger organizations designing more complex enterprise deployments that include development and testing versions of the product deployed on separate networks for internal QA and testing of new features or applications before pushing them to a production enterprise. In fact, it's becoming increasingly common for users to want to move an application and its related content from a group in a development ArcGIS Enterprise to a staging ArcGIS Enterprise, and then ultimately to roll out at a production ArcGIS Enterprise. Now, using content migration via groups, you can export items from the dev enterprise and then import them into the staging environment without requiring connectivity between the two. And this process can also be replicated to move content from the staging environment then to the production environment. In addition, the export operation can be used to extract content so that it can be moved between two disconnected environments. And this works great for workflows where select content needs to be backed up and restored or archived versus trying to back up the whole system, which we have other tools for. And it also supports moving between two different operating systems, such as migrating from one on an enterprise on Linux to one on Windows or vice versa. At 10.8.1 and 10.9, this is a developer-only experience, meaning the sharing REST APIs are present, but there's no portal UI UX yet. Additionally, these options are only supported in ArcGIS Enterprise and not supported in ArcGIS Online at this time. So beginning at 10.8.1, two new REST sharing APIs exist on a group: export and import. Export allows you to extract all supported items or set of supported items from a group into an export package or EPK file that can be uploaded and published into a separate ArcGIS Enterprise organization. And since these tools operate on a group, content to be exported must first be shared into that group. Import imports supported content items from an export into the selected group. And when the items are imported, their item IDs are maintained and URLs are updated to reflect their new environment. Once the items have been imported successfully, the export package will be deleted. And before running the import tool, that EPK file must first be added as an item. So like we said, this requires ArcGIS Enterprise version 10.8.1 or higher, and furthermore, both groups have to be set up in both the export and import enterprises before beginning the workflow. It's also only available to administrators and group owners and not group members, and new at 10.9, you can import content into a specific folder. So that folder will need to exist before the content is imported, and this is really great for ensuring that your content remains organized when importing your new items. Additionally, you can import items from older versions of Enterprise to newer ones, but keep in mind they will not automatically inherit any new capabilities in that newer Enterprise, and you can't move content backwards from a newer version of ArcGIS Enterprise to an older one. Now, there are currently over 60 supported items, including web maps, web scenes, and web mapping applications, including Web App Builder and configurable apps, as well as support for file geodatabases and other documents, and hosted feature services. And the roadmap includes reference services, support for ArcGIS dashboards, as well as ArcGIS story maps. So now let's delve a little bit deeper into how content migration via groups works at a workflow level. Essentially, you create a group in Enterprise A and then share content into it. You then run the export tool to export that into a downloadable EPK file, and then add that file to Enterprise B before unpacking it and importing it into the destination group in Enterprise B. Now, both groups do have to be created before this process begins, and this is not designed to move an entire enterprise because there's a 5 gig limit on the total package and a 1 gig limit on any individual layer in it. However, like we discussed earlier, this is designed to help you move content like applications between a dev, testing, and production system, or between two disconnected ArcGIS Enterprise deployments, for example, ones on two separate classification levels. Now, one of the powerful things about this workflow is that while this can be done manually through the portal sharing API, you can also script it with the Python API. Importantly, it also maintains item IDs so that all dependencies of an application are reflected in the import environment, and gives you the option to overwrite imported items if they already exist in the destination ArcGIS Enterprise. So now let's go ahead and take a look at a demonstration of content migration using groups in ArcGIS Enterprise in action. We'll begin our demo in our exporting ArcGIS Enterprise, or what we'll call ArcGIS Enterprise A, which is ArcGIS Enterprise version 10.8.1 running on a Windows operating system. Now, you'll notice that we've actually already created the group that we're intending to export, and it contains data such as a hosted feature service, a web map, web applications, and several documents and files. Now, to export this group, we'll go into our portal's REST API and move into the group that we're going to export. We'll select the new Export Group option, and while we can selectively export items based off item ID, we'll select to export all items in this case. Now, this will generate a .epk file that we will download onto my local machine so that I can then upload it to another enterprise. Now that we have the file, we'll move over into our importing enterprise, or Enterprise B, which is ArcGIS Enterprise version 10.9 running on a Linux operating system. You'll notice here we've created both the folder and our content, as well as the destination group into which we'll be importing the items into Enterprise B. Now we'll move into the REST API of Enterprise B and add that .epk file as an item in our content. Now I'll go ahead and add the item. And you'll notice that once that item's added, if we go into our content in portal, you'll see the new item in our content appearing as a file right here. So now that the item's been added, we'll go back into the REST API and go into the group that we're looking to import the item into. Since the item has been added, we'll go into our desired import group. And import the item into the group using the import tool to unpack all the items that we previously exported. We'll paste in the package item ID, as well as the ID of the folder that we're planning to add the item into, and the username. Now, before importing, we're going to go ahead and verify that the items in the package that have all been exported are there, and that we're going to be able to import them without any issues by choosing this Show Package Preview Only. You'll notice we see our web mapping application, feature service, documents, and web map are all able to be imported and don't currently exist in this org. Now that we've verified they can be imported, we can go ahead and import the package, and we'll choose to import all items in it. Now, once imported, you can then go into your content and see that the items have been added to the correct folder in your content, as well as shared into the import group. In this case, that staging group where we were adding the items to. Additionally, if we go back into our content, we'll also notice that the .epk file has now disappeared from it since we've gone ahead and run the import tool. However, we all know that it's common for users to make periodic changes to applications and then want to push those updates to production environments. Back in Enterprise A, we've added some new functionality to our application and would now like to move it to Enterprise B. To do that, we'll go back into our group and export the items again. However, in this case, we'll just export the updated application as there's no further action needed for the other items. We'll save the package file and then move into the REST API of Enterprise B. And then we'll go through the same workflow of adding it as an item, and now this is where it's really important to note that item IDs are maintained across both enterprises, as not only does it enable applications to maintain their configuration with their dependencies, but it also enables you to overwrite existing items based off their item ID. This time, when importing, we'll go ahead and overwrite those existing items. We'll paste in the package item ID. And while we could selectively import specific item IDs, since there's only one in there, we'll just choose to import the entire package with the single item we exported. We'll go ahead and show the package preview before importing. And you'll notice that some of these items are already existing, and then we can go ahead and overwrite them. We'll select the Overwrite Existing Items button to ensure that we're just overwriting the individual items that we're working with, and import the package. Now, once it's been imported, we'll again see that these items have been updated in our content, with the web application now being the most recently updated item. This is how you can use the new group export and import tools to migrate content between two ArcGIS Enterprise deployments, beginning at ArcGIS Enterprise version 10.8.1. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my colleague Bill Major to talk about how we can automate this workflow using the Python API to migrate content between two ArcGIS organizations using groups. Bill?
Thanks, Kenyon. Welcome everybody to the 2021 Developer Summit. My name is Bill Major. I'm a Principal Software Development Engineer on the ArcGIS Enterprise Development Team for Esri. I get to work on a lot of the back-end products, in particular notebooks and notebook server. Also, I have the pleasure and opportunity to work closely with the ArcGIS API for Python team. So I'm here today to show you some of the Python ways of executing the group migration workflows. Okay, so in the spirit of this being a developer summit and the REST API tools for group data migration is still kind of a developer story at the moment. So let's dig into some Python code and really understand how we can automate this process using the ArcGIS API for Python. Okay. So what you see here is the API reference for the Python API. It's at version 1.8.4 right now. That will soon be updated to 1.9 release a little bit later this spring. And within the ArcGIS API for Python, what we're going to focus on today is the Group Migration Manager. Okay. So this is a class that is derived off of a group that gives you the ability to export or create your export packages, as well as load them or extract them into another portal or another enterprise setup. Okay, so we have the ability to, like I said, create a package. You have a few options here. If you don't pass anything into when you the request to create a package, you'll get all the contents in the group. You can optionally specify a subset list of items. So if you don't want all of that group, just some of it, you have those capabilities. We have the inspect capability. So basically it allows you to see what's inside of a package, preview if you want to think of it that way. So then once you load that package file, export package into a new enterprise, and then you're ready to extract it or import it, in this case load it, you have a few options here as well. The name of the item, which item IDs you want to extract. It will do all by default. You could specify a subset of IDs, whether you want to overwrite items with the same item IDs or not. And then there's this is basically a future call, whether you want to run that command synchronous or asynchronously, something specific to the Python API. So these are the methods that we're going to look at today. So I have a notebook I'm going to use for demonstration purposes today. Here I'm just going to walk through a few things. I have my source enterprise set up, which is 10.8.1. This is the same group or same data sets that Kenyon was demonstrating earlier. So this is going to be what I call our source portal. And then I have a target portal, the portal I'm going to move it to. Or if you want to think of migrating between dev and test, for example, think that one is dev, one is test, if you want to kind of think of it that way. Another thing just to highlight here is we're moving between a 10.8.1 enterprise setup and a 10.9 setup. So do know that you can move up between different versions, export packages. So that's that's a benefit as well. So here's my notebook. I'm just going to go through a few things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, using the Python API, I'm going to make a connection to my what I call the source portal. Where is my data sets that I want to create an export package from? So that's that particular portal I showed you a while ago. I'm going to get a handle to the group that has all of the data. So this is the NP apps and data. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. So now I have a Python variable that references that group object in that portal. Okay. So the way you actually get to the group migration manager, as I mentioned earlier, is off of a group object. Okay. So once I have a group variable, I can use the .migration method or property to basically give me the group migration manager for that group. Okay, so that's the way you get at or use the group migration manager class within the Python API. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this cell because it does take a minute. So then once you have the migration manager, you can call .create, and that .create is calling this method right here. The two parameters are optional, and what it will do is create the export package for all the items in that group and make it ready for download. So this will take just a moment to run. So just reading ahead when we get to that point. Oh, there, sure enough. So it has now created me a new item in my source portal, and it is a export package that I can now do something with. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to download it. So you may notice that I'm running a notebook here on actually an entirely separate enterprise with notebook server installation from the two enterprises that I am moving data between. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to download this export package relative to this notebook so then I can upload it to what I'm calling my target portal. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and download this. It just downloads it to a temporary location specific to my notebook. And that should take just a second. So there we go. So we now have this export package created. It's an item in my source portal. I've gone ahead and downloaded it now so that I can move on to the next step. So what I'm going to do now is actually upload this to a target portal or my 10.9 portal, or if we want to think of it, our test portal if we're moving from dev to test. So I'm going to go ahead and create a connection object to it. you can disregard this. I got a little bit of cleanup here I'm going to run just for demo purposes. So what I'm going to do first is I have a handle to this item, this export package that I've downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and upload that to my target enterprise as a new item. So now this is a new item in this portal. If I actually insert a cell below this and say P item, then I actually, there's an item there in my target portal that is an export package. Okay. Then the next step is I want to create a group that is going to be the group that this package gets exploded or extracted into. Remember, these are group migration data tools. So that means you're moving from a group to another group. It's not moving, from one user's content to another user's content void of the group structure. So this is all about moving from one group to another group. So you have to have a group that the export package actually gets extracted into. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a group and then share this export package with that group. Okay. So I created a group. It's very quick. The name of my group is Test Group Migration Demo, and then I've shared my export package with that new group. Okay. Now, before we fully extract it and publish it, publish the data into this new group, into my target enterprise, we may want to inspect it just to make sure that that package contains what we think it does. Okay, so we're just going to visually inspect this, and the way we do this is, again, we're going to use one of now we're in the target enterprise space. So the new group object refers to that group that I just created, and now I'm going to get the group migration manager Python class off of that group. So I get the migration, and then I inspect that item, and then I just print it out. Basically, this returns a Python dictionary, or think of it as a JSON structure in this case. Okay. Now, if we look at this, of course, it gives some basic summary about the package summary. What's in it, the version of portal, the package version, some information like that, and then all of the individual items that are part of this package. So we see, the item IDs. It has a title, it has a type, when it was created, can it be imported. So this is good. This looks like what I was expecting. There's a document, PowerPoint, PDFs, and some other pieces of information in this export package. So this all looks good to me. Of course, you could programmatically inspect this dictionary, this JSON structure, if you wanted to really validate that the package contains what it needs before you go through a import process. All right, so the next part of this is the export package is uploaded. It looks good to me from a preview or inspection process. So now I'm going to go ahead and extract that. So this takes, like I said, a couple minutes. So what is in the load process? Let's look at those parameters again. So the first thing you must pass to it is the name of a package, okay, or an export package. Now, since you've already derived the group manager, the group migration manager class off of a group, it already knows which group that you're going to be extracting this into. So group doesn't need to be a parameter here. So the package has an ID. It has all these item IDs in it. You have the ability to only load or extract a subset of those item IDs out of that package. So do know that that's an option. For items that already exist, item IDs, do you want to overwrite or not? So if a new hosted feature service comes across with an item ID, then and it already exists, and you say overwrite is true, then it's basically going to do a full overwrite of that hosted feature service. Okay, so be very aware of that overwrite parameter and what it's doing. Okay, So let's go back and check to see if that's done. It appears it has. I have a response. It reported me back some information, if anything failed or was skipped. So it looks like everything was imported successfully. Now the really great thing about the group data migration is that item IDs exist between portals. So that's when moving from dev to test to prod. A lot of customers very much desire that. It helps them with integration testing. It helps them make sure that if they develop something in dev and they're relying on item IDs, they should be able to then move that application, web app, or whatever it may be throughout the process, and you're assured that those same item IDs are there. So we're just going to do a quick check. We're going to query the source enterprise for my hosted feature service, the target, and then print out the item IDs, and they look to be exactly the same since my assert didn't fail. So that means that my item IDs between my two hosted feature services match. So that's really great. And if we go over here to my target portal at this point and just do a little refresh, we will see that, of course, my data has come across. When you do a import or load, it does create a folder for you in your content, and that's where all that information is published to. So it does that by default. I'm not sure if Kenyon mentioned this, but at 10.9 you will actually also have the ability, as you can see here, to specify a folder ID. So instead of creating a new folder each time you go through a import process, you also have the ability within code to specify a specific folder, existing folder, to import that into. So that's nice. So in my target portal, my package seems to have been imported correctly. It does delete the EPK at the end of the process, so now that's cleaned up, and all that data is there. All the item IDs are the same between both enterprise environments, so that's really great stuff. So another thing you might want to be thinking about is, well, I mentioned this subset of item IDs. How would you do that with the ArcGIS API for Python as well? So in this cell here, I queried the source portal for the just a hosted feature service. So I'm going to reuse that item object, and I'm going to create a new export package and pass it only that item. And what that will do is, I'm just going to get this running. That should package up only that hosted feature service. Okay. So what this allows you to do is, as new maybe items are being added to a group, you don't have to export the entire package to be able to then just import a subset of item IDs. You can also create a package of just a subset of those item objects, and hopefully it may be quicker. The package will be smaller, so there's some reasons you may want to do that. So I have that package. You can see it completed. So I'm going to go ahead and download that again, so it's relative to now my notebook. I'm now going to upload this to my target portal using the subset syntax here a little bit, just so that not differentiate between the original item. I gave it a slightly different subset name, so that's good. I have a export package in my target portal. I'm going to go ahead and share it with the same group. I'm using the same new group and not creating a new group in this case, so that's okay. And now I'm going to inspect the package just to make sure it does only have that one hosted feature service in it. And you may say it takes a second when you do an inspect, and the reason for that is it unfortunately has to download that item so that it can, relative to where I'm running my Python's script, which in this case is a notebook, to extract it. So you noticed, just to highlight this, that there are actually two items in this package in this case. And why is that? It's the hosted feature service as well as the shapefile. So one of the things that the documentation does highlight is when you export data, that some items have relationships or dependencies between them. Anytime you publish a hosted feature service, It comes from a zip shapefile from a CSV, and when you go through that workflow, the sharing API creates a relationship between those two items. So what's happening, it briefly talks about those dependencies and those relationships in the help. So what's happening is when it exports out that hosted feature service, it also brings along the dependencies that item has. And in this particular case, the shapefile that was originally used to create it. So that's okay. Just it's just something to be aware of when you're creating packages, and you may have more items there than you originally thought. So now what we're going to do is, and one of the things to try to illustrate this, if you refresh this page here, anytime my content displays, it's always in date time order. And we just see the date here. If you hover, you actually do see a timestamp there. But now I'm going to go ahead and run this last cell, and I'm going to say, let's import this export package, and overwrite is true. So what should happen here is when we run this is we've already moved that hosted feature service over once, item IDs match. Now we're basically going through the workflow again for just the hosted feature service. The item ID is going to match, and so it's basically going to overwrite that hosted feature service. Okay, so the great thing there is it takes care of all of that for you. You don't have to worry about deleting a hosted feature service first or anything to that effect. It takes care of this full overwrite for you. So this will take just hopefully just a few more seconds. But if I come over here and do a refresh on my content, not sure if it's finished yet or not. You'll notice that my hosted feature service has now moved up to the top of my date time order. Okay, that's because that feature service was effectively updated or overwritten, and therefore takes on a new timestamp. Okay, so hopefully that illustrates the overwrite process, but also more importantly, how you can move a subset of items over and not a full package each time. Okay. Now this is great, and I thought this would be interesting, in the spirit of automation and then being able to run these things on a schedule. Suppose you did want to run something like this on a schedule. We have the really great distributed collaboration tools that will sync information, one way or two way on a schedule. But suppose you wanted to take advantage of these APIs using the Python API, and perhaps run this once an hour, once a week, or maybe have some other custom logic in a notebook or in a Python script that you wanted to run on a schedule. So the good news is you can actually already do this if you have ArcGIS Enterprise configured with a notebook server. Once you have a notebook set up like you want it, you can actually come here and create a new task. So let's say that this task I want to run, dev to test every hour. I don't know, something to that effect. Let's say every 5 minutes, whatever it might be. All right. So I'm not going to pass any parameters. I'm going to say, hey, I want to run this once every 5 minutes. And I'm just going to run it for a total number of times of 1, just for demonstration purposes here today. I don't need to update the notebook with the new copy of the results and everything like that, so I'm going to uncheck that. All right, so now I'm going to create a task. We're going to let this thing go through its cycle. I'm going to pause the video just for a moment and then come back after that first iteration has happened and wrap up the demo. Okay, I'm back. It's been 5 minutes, so we've had time for one iteration of my scheduled task here to run. If we go look at the details of this, sure enough, we can see that one task did run after 5 minutes. Of course, you can see the results, which basically just loads a display of a preview of the notebook, in its final state. So hopefully this was useful. What we've covered here today is how you can use the Python API either in a notebook or also directly in Python script to basically automate your group migration data needs from one enterprise installation to another. They can be at different versions. If moving from an older to a newer versions, it could be dev to test scenarios or whatever the situation may be. And also showed you how you could then perhaps schedule a notebook that will run on some cycle to automate this entire workflow for you. So hopefully this was useful. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kenyon, to close out our session today.
Great, Bill. Thanks for that demonstration on how we can automate content migration using groups with the Python API. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave behind a couple of resources on how you can use this workflow, including some documentation on the import group content and export group content on our ArcGIS for Developers page, as well as a blog post from Hillary Curtis on how you can implement this yourself with your own ArcGIS Enterprises, and some additional information from the release notes of what's new in ArcGIS Enterprise 10.8.1, as well as the blog post from the product team on what's new in ArcGIS Enterprise 10.8.1. So with that, I want to go ahead and thank you all for attending and wrap up as we'll begin our question and answers. Just as a reminder, we'll have our moderators, Hillary Curtis and Caroline Wright, a product manager and product engineer on the ArcGIS Enterprise team, as well as myself and my colleague Bill Major, to answer any of the questions you may have had about this presentation. Thank you for your time, and we'll go ahead and open it up to questions.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming to this session on migrating content using groups. We got some really great questions coming in throughout the session, and we have the presenters Kenyon and Bill, as well as Caroline and myself on the product team here to answer your questions for about the next 15 minutes or so. If we're not able to get to your question, you can visit us in the Ask the Experts area, and we'll also spend a little bit of time after the session just replying on Slido. So I think we can go ahead and get started here. One of the questions that I pinned there at the top about documentation. So I know it's a lot of information to kind of take in just 45 minutes. So I linked a blog that walks through the workflow, as well as 2 documentation topics. So there's one for exporting content and one for import. So hopefully that will help as kind of an extra resource on the side. And I think that this session will also be available within the application here. So if you wanted to go back and see any parts that you might have not gotten completely, it will be available. So we've got another one too, Bill. This one will be for you. Can you share the demo notebook and the Python code there?
Sure, Hillary. So if I posted a reply to that question. Hopefully everyone can see it. We have a practice where a lot of the notebooks for conferences, we actually put on a public GitHub location. It's a public GitHub for the Python API samples, but all of our conference notebooks, we put their years of conference notebooks. So look to that location. We'll have this information there as soon as we can.
Yeah, sounds great, Bill. Thanks. We got a couple of questions. I didn't move all of them over because a lot of them were related. One of the first questions we got, I think even before the session, was, will we support additional content using these tools, specifically map services and non-hosted services that you've published, maybe from an enterprise geodatabase? So Caroline, do you want to talk a bit about the roadmap there and some of our future plans?
Yep. So we definitely recognize that moving map services, non-hosted services is a very important use case to you all. And we are actively working on a solution that will be post 10.9. But we're also very interested to hear more about your use cases. So if you have time and are open, certainly reach out to myself, Caroline Wright, or to Hillary Curtis via direct message, or contact us at the ArcGIS Enterprise Ask an Expert Island, and we will be more than happy to hear about your use case and to talk more about this feature.
Yeah, absolutely. The Ask the Experts is at the top of the conference page, and then you'll see a list of channels, and we'll be in that ArcGIS Enterprise space. So definitely come visit us or send us a message. There's a good one here, Bill. Maybe this one is for you. Does the work beyond the initial movement of data from dev to prod to later push updates and replacements from dev to prod work without changing the item ID? So for example, if you need to test changes to components like a web map or app in development before implementing in production.
Yeah, actually it does. That's a great question. I would say posted a message there. Be sure to watch today's plenary. We're going to highlight this capability a little bit more there today. But to answer your question, yes, it does. So the first time you move a export package from one environment to the other, item IDs are preserved. And then if you decide in the future to go through that process again, item IDs are maintained for those same items. So that does happen. And what happens is when you go to import that package a second time, you have the option to either overwrite the existing item altogether or not at all. So that's the way that process works. So you can use it, again and again to continually update item IDs in that production environment.
Yeah, that's great, Bill. And I think that kind of goes to one of the questions here too. If the content already exists in both environments, so the content exists, but this tool wasn't used to migrate the content initially, can this still be used to update? And it can. The tools work on the item IDs. So if it recognizes the same item ID in both environments, you could choose to overwrite it if you wanted to. So if you've created the same content in both environments not using this, it's likely that the item IDs are different. So hopefully that helps to answer.